All right, let's get started. So, thank you everyone for joining the 2067 All-Star roster review. Can someone let me know in chat if you can hear me? Waiting for someone to confirm and then I will keep going. All right, awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. So this is the first year we are not using computer generated reveals for all-star rosters. Craig and I um, collaborated on this. How it worked was we each selected our starters and reserves for both batters and pitchers and created our own ballots. Then we compared the ballots and had some discussions to hammer out some of the final ones that we disagreed with. But we probably agreed with 80%. So it was only 20% that we hashed out together. We had no specific strategy going into it, and that was on purpose, right? Because we think differently, and we didn't want to say, hey, you have to do it by war, you have to do it by this or that, right? So we did it with who, in our eyes, are the best players for this first half of the season. And so, without further ado, we're going to dive into it. I don't have too much time, um, but we're going to start in the National League. And we will start with the starting catcher. I'm just going to go in order of the positions. So at starting catcher in the National League, we have Augusto Burnaby from the Chicago Cubs, batting an impressive 311 with a 375 on base percentage for a catcher while playing solid enough defense. All right, At first base, we have representing the National League, Yared Ariza as your starting first baseman coming out of Oakland. Congrats, Oak Andy. He is just ripping the cover off the ball, 162 OPS plus. Um, Listed as a second baseman, but definitely not playing second base. He is your starting first baseman in the National League. All right, at second base. So far, all of these, by the way, were agreed upon. None of these were controversial to us. At second base, we have from the Miami Marlins, Brian Reedy. At second base, pacing for 3,100 RBIs with 30 steal season. Just solid across the board, on pace for a 7.1 WAR. All right. Next up, we have the third baseman. Again, this one was agreed upon. The only starter in the National League that we did not agree on was center field. So I'll show you that when we get there. But starting at third base from the Toronto Blue Jays, Yunal Campos. OPS over 1. Ridiculous. And this is clearly your starting third baseman. Starting at shortstop. This is our first team with 2 All-Stars from the Chicago Cubs, Parker Egan. Look at this. The shortstop who might hit 40 home runs. Your clear starter at shortstop. All right, now let's get to the outfield. In left field, again, not a controversial pick. Your MVP candidate from the London Royals, Miguel Benavides. Just a crazy slash line. One of the most impressive hitters we have in the league right now based on statistics. All right. Center field I mentioned was the one controversial one. We worked it out very quickly. Um, it was between two center fielders, either Cambry from Arizona or Monge from Texas. And the all-star starter in center field has gone to Ansel Monge from Texas. The slugging center fielder led all center fielders in all the big hitting categories. Camber had more WAR and is a more all-around player, but the slugging and the defense is good enough. Monge will get the start. In right field, uncontroversial pick from the New York Yankees, your last year Rookie of the Year, Mel Jean, as your starting right fielder. All right, and to round up the starting lineup, your DH will be Jeff Graff from the Texas Rangers. So that sums up the starters. Now let's take a look at who the reserves are before we get into the pitchers. So your first reserve will be from the Texas Rangers with their third All-Star to lead all teams so far is shortstop Samuel Quixote. A shortstop on pace for 45 home runs, 140 RBIs. Absolutely amazing. Um, and is your first reserve in the infield. One thing I forgot to mention, we're doing 9 starters, obviously, 5 reserves. So 1 backup catcher, 2 infielders, 2 outfielders, 5 pitchers, and 7 relievers. So your next reserve in the infield. This one was not agreed upon, but we both had it in our top 3. So this one made it, even though it was third on one of ours and I think first or second on the other. From the Milwaukee Brewers, Christian Fried. In case you were curious who the other options were, the second spot was between Fried and then Areola from the Cubs and Villa from the Marlins, but Fried gets it. So that is, oh, sorry, and I forgot the backup catcher. So the last position player before we get to pitchers at backup catcher from the Atlanta Braves, Bolin Parham. The bars don't look that impressive, but somehow is a 70. But absolutely ripping the ball. Defense is solid enough to make it and will be your backup catcher behind Burnaby of the Cubs. All right, now let's get into pitchers. All 5 pitchers for starters were completely agreed upon, so there was no back and forth here. Curious if y'all will agree or disagree, but we thought the same. So your first starting pitcher is Francis Sherez from the San Francisco Giants, having a ridiculous season. These pitchers also aren't in any specific order, though I think we agreed this was the number one. We disagreed on the order, I think, for the rest of them. But your second pitcher, again, not in any particular order, is from the Toronto Blue Jays, Paul Cooper. This is the second All-Star, I believe, for Toronto. All right. The third pitcher from Oakland, Andy, with a second All-Star, we have J.R. Voltland. All right, next up. Oh, 1 second. All right, next up, we are on the fifth pitcher. Will be from the Detroit Tigers. The bars don't look pretty, but the stats are Julio Cesar Arevalo. And last but not least, your fifth starting pitcher from the Miami Marlins, Kenny Scarface Musgrave. So that is two former Arizona pitchers making it on new teams with Paul Cooper and Musgrave. All right, now to the relievers in no particular order. We're going to start out with, if this will load, hold on. All right, so now we are at the relievers in the National League. Again, in no order. We agreed on 5 of them, and the final 2 we had to compromise and talk. But first up, we have from the Atlanta Braves, Wilbert Newell. On pace for nearly 60 saves, pitching in high leverage with a .89 whip. Clear All-Star, making his third All-Star selection. Next up, from your Detroit Tigers, Jason, with another pitcher making it, we have Mark Levy, another high leverage reliever having an insane year. All right. Next up, we have, I think, the third player from the Toronto Blue Jays, Norris Jones, with his 40 control, but only 2.2 walks per 9, is having an unreal season. One of the lower innings pitch counts so far. I don't know. It doesn't look like injury. Must be. I'm not sure, but 28's not too bad, I guess. Maybe not enough save situations right now in Toronto. How are they doing? They're doing good. Maybe they're just blowing him out. I don't know. All right. On to the fourth one. We have the second selection coming out of London. They're going to have to travel abroad because I don't think the All-Star game is held in London. Dylan Lee from the London Royals, another Arizona trade. So that's the third Arizona pitcher on a new team making the All-Star game the next year. Welcome, Dylan, first-time All-Star. And then lastly, the last one we agreed upon, from the Chicago Cubs, a 3-time, now 4-time All-Star in his 6th season, Fry Stallnacker. So these are the 5 relievers that we agreed upon. And then essentially we each picked one for the final 2 spots as we were very far off. So we each got one selection for the 6th and 7th. So again, these aren't necessarily in order, but from the Detroit Tigers, making it their third pitcher, Isaac Wachtman. And lastly, the only All-Star on the Las Vegas Knights. The bars do not look pretty. The attitude is not pretty. But the statistics tell another story with an insane 342 ERA plus. Igor Kobos. I'll send out the list after this, but that concludes the National League All-Stars. Now we will move on to the American League, the division and the conference that Craig and I live in. All right. We'll start at catcher again. We'll go in order. So your starting catcher, first-time All-Star from the California Angels, Kent Homa. Having a very impressive year on both sides. All right. Next up is first base. First base is one we agreed on. We agreed on everything except center field, but it wasn't contentious at all. So first baseman in the American League hails from Indianapolis, Mr. Milton Baldelli, a former Rookie of the Year, and a second-time All-Star in as many seasons. All right. Next up, your second baseman from the Vancouver Cascades, another first-time All-Star. He does it with the glove, and the bat has been a surprise. Clinton Brady in what looks like his rookie season at 22 years old. So welcome, Brady, I guess. Brady. First-time All-Star from Vancouver. In third base, I promise this was not fixed because I voted for him number one as well. Bars that I hate with this ugly avoid Ks, but it's from your Dodgers, Robert Regis, on pace for an insane 44 home runs with 116 ribbies. All right, at shortstop, we have a Yort sighting. Hopefully, we'll be able to play with an unknown day-to-day injury. But from the Baltimore Orioles, David Thompson. You knew you would get the glove, but again, the bat has been a pleasant surprise, especially given the bars, and on pace for 42 stolen bases. All right, in left field, we have our second Angel of the day, Mr. Joshua Page. Could be a center fielder too, damn. In center field, again, this one we went back and forth with. The backup, the second string on our ballot for center field was each other's first string, and we knew the other one was going to make it as a reserve. So it wasn't too contentious. Craig let me decide. I decided, just so we didn't have any rigging accusations, not to give it to the Dodger. So California, two-time MVP, two-time, now three-time All-Star, Jason Ball as your starting center fielder. So that is 3 California Angels in the starting lineup. In right field has the 2 top WAR players in all of the American League, and only one can start. So your starter, leading all the league in WAR, amongst other categories, Quinn Reynosa from the Dodgers, making it the Dodgers' second All-Star in the starting lineup. All right, and also leading in average in the league. All right, your backups, your reserves for the All-Star game. We have, from the New York Metropolitans, Yoris Campos, two-time All-Star now. Now the reserves in the infield. We have from the St. Louis Cardinals, Wilton Tabota. An insane 161 OPS plus. Your second infield reserve, who can play all over the infield. First time All Star at age 29. Again, another player you knew the defense would be there, but you didn't know the bat would. We have Walt Lininger from the Colorado Rockies with their first All Star. Same with St. Louis. And then in your outfield, as I mentioned, center field was between a Dodger and an Angel. So we have the Dodger Joshua Brooks as your reserve outfielder number 1. And then as the reserve outfielder number 2, someone who has caught fire the last 3 weeks and was not an all-star when we started these ballots, but became one. Second in the league in average, second in the league in WAR, even though he's just a platoon player. From my Chicago White Sox, David Limon, former Rule 5 draft pick from Montreal 2 seasons ago. All right, so that sums up the American League batters. Let us get to the pitchers. We agreed on the top 4. The 5th and 6th we both had in different orders. Both the 5 and 6 options were Dodgers, so I just let Craig pick. Again, these are in no particular order except for the 5th one, I believe at least. So as your starter, I think this one actually was the obvious choice for everyone. 2-time pitcher of the year, now 3-time All-Star, 27-year-old Buzz Johnson from the Memphis Blues. Starter number 2 from your Philadelphia Phillies, Tucker Day, 2nd-time All-Star in his, looks like, how many seasons are we at? 4th season. All right. Next up, 3rd pitcher from your Vancouver Cascades, Jess Nieme. 1st-time All-Star, age 24 in his 4th season. A lot of first-time All-Stars we're seeing because we don't care about how popular the players are. We went strictly on who is playing the best. And we got some ugly bars coming up, but your 4th starter unanimously is Theodore Ozimek from the Seattle Mariners in his 3rd season. And then the 5th starter, it was between 2. Both were from the Dodgers, and we agreed to go with Sammy Marsh with a ridiculous 182 ERA plus. Now with the relievers, we agreed on 5 of the 7. Sorry, I lied. We agreed on 4 of the 7. Each of us had a number 2 selection that neither of us even had on the ballot, so both of those made it. And then we discussed the 7th. It was between 2, and I will reveal who it was. But starting off, not controversially, from the Cleveland Indians, Julio Prieto, with a ridiculous 13.5 Ks per 9 in the closer role in Cleveland. Also, a first-time All-Star. All right, next up, we do not have a first-time All-Star. We have a 5-time All-Star from the Indianapolis Ignition, Max Bax, Maxwell Baxter, having a great season. All right, 2 more uncontroversial ones. PJ Klopper from the Vancouver Cascades, yet another first-time All-Star. And then, hold on one second. the last uncontroversial pick before we had to discuss and make some decisions is some pretty ugly bars, but again, we're going based on who's playing the best. Jonah Hopkins is somehow pitching his lights off with a 388 ERA plus, a whip at .86, and an ERA of 1.17. Not closing and pitching in the highest of leverage, it seems, but this was too much to deny. All right, now we'll get into we'll get into Craig's pick. His number 2, which again I didn't even have on my ballot, was from California with 35 control and 4.4 walks. As a closer, though, pitching in high leverage, somehow managing a low whip. First time All-Star at age 30, Ponce Fernandez. And next, we will get into who I had as my number 2 from the Seattle Mariners. Another first-time All-Star. We should figure out how many first-time All-Stars there are. Ugly bars, but ridiculous stats. Peyton Flack with a 443 ERA plus, 85 whip, .95 ERA. Ridiculous stats. Similar to, I think it was Toronto's reliever, not the most innings, not pitching in the highest leverage, but these stats were too much for me to ignore. And then lastly, we were deciding between 2 relievers for that 7th spot. It was between Wong of the Los Angeles Dodgers and Abdo of the Virginia Black Bears. Abdo has better numbers, but is pitching in low leverage. And so the decision went to setup man Joshua Wong, a first-time All-Star in, is it his rookie year? No, I don't think so. Maybe it is. No, it doesn't look like it. Second year. Um, will be your final All-Star out of the bullpen. So I will post these right after, but hope y'all enjoyed. Let us know where we messed up. Tell us we're not as good as the AI, even though that's not true. And hope you enjoyed this, and see y'all in about 40 days for the 2068 All-Star Review.